Ruth was only 17, a bright and ambitious girl in her final year of secondary school. She dreamed of becoming a lawyer, fighting for justice, and making a difference in the world. But her dreams were abruptly threatened when her parents, Ken and Ruby, made a heartbreaking decision. Their family had been struggling with poverty for years. Debts piled up, food was scarce, and Ruth's younger siblings often went to bed hungry. When Ken fell seriously ill, requiring urgent medical attention, and their house was at risk of being taken by creditors, they felt trapped. Then came Boniface, a wealthy businessman in his 50s who offered a way out, but at a terrible cost. "I will settle all your debts," Boniface told them, stroking his graying beard. "I will pay the hospital bills, buy you a new house, and take care of your family. But in return, you must give me Ruth as my wife." Ruby hesitated, but Ken saw no other way. "She is still young," Ruby protested, but Ken silenced her. "Do you want me to die? Do you want our children to starve? Boniface will give her a good life." That night, Ruth overheard the conversation. Her heart pounded in her chest. "They want to sell me," she whispered to herself. She had seen Boniface before, an arrogant man who already had 3 wives. He wanted her, not for love, but as another trophy. The wedding was set in 3 weeks. Ruth pleaded, cried, and begged, but her parents remained firm. "You will thank us one day," her father said coldly. "We are doing this for the family." The night before the wedding, Ruth made a daring decision. She could not allow her life to be stolen from her. With nothing but a small bag of clothes and the little money she had saved, she escaped. She took the first bus she found and headed to the city, Lagos. But she was not free yet. The moment her family discovered her escape, they were furious. Boniface, humiliated and enraged, demanded she be brought back. "If she does not return, I will withdraw my help," he threatened. Ruth's parents, desperate, spread the word and sent relatives to track her down. Ruth, scared and alone in a strange city, had no idea what to do next. She wandered the streets, exhausted and hungry, until she collapsed near a busy roadside. That was where Mr. Brown found her. Mr. Brown was a human rights activist, known for rescuing young girls from forced marriages and abuse. He took Ruth to a shelter where she was given food, clothes, and a safe place to stay. When she told her story, Mr. Brown was furious. "This is unacceptable," he declared. "No girl should be forced into marriage. You have a right to your own life." Mr. Brown used his influence to ensure Ruth's safety. He contacted the authorities, warning her family that any attempt to force her back would be treated as a crime. He enrolled Ruth in school, covering all her expenses. For the first time, Ruth felt free. She worked hard, determined to make the most of the opportunity she had been given. Years passed, and Ruth fulfilled her dream. She became a lawyer, specializing in human rights and the fight against child marriage. She was strong, confident, and ready to fight for other girls like her. Then one day, her past came knocking. Ken and Ruby arrived at her office, looking frail and desperate. "Ruth, please," her mother sobbed. "We need your help." Ruth felt a storm of emotions. The same parents who had tried to sell her were now asking for her mercy. "Why should I help you?" she asked, her voice steady. Her father broke down. "Boniface refused to help us. Your younger brother is sick. He needs surgery. We have no money and no one else will help." Ruth took a deep breath. She had every right to turn them away, but she was no longer that scared 17-year-old girl. She had grown. "I will help," she finally said, "but not because you deserve it. I will help because I am not like you." She paid for her brother's treatment, but she set a condition. Her parents had to publicly denounce forced marriage. They had to speak to their community and warn others against making the same mistake. Ashamed, Ken and Ruby agreed. They stood before the village, confessing their regrets. "We almost destroyed our daughter's life," Ken admitted. "But she rose above our failures. No child should be sold for money." Ruth's story became an inspiration. She dedicated her life to fighting for girls trapped in the same fate she once escaped. And in the end, she proved that true power did not come from wealth or control, but from the courage to say no. Ruth had won many battles, but her greatest fight was just beginning. Boniface had failed in his attempt to marry her, but he remained a powerful man. Wealthy, well-connected, and ruthless, he had built an empire that thrived on exploiting young girls. Now, Ruth was determined to bring him down and free those still trapped in his grip. Through Mr. Brown's network, Ruth uncovered heartbreaking stories. Many of Boniface's young brides were locked away, forbidden from seeing their families. Some had escaped and were living on the streets, too afraid to return home. Others had lost their lives due to complications they were too young to endure. "This has to stop," Ruth said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "He must be held accountable." She began gathering evidence. Former staff members, maids, drivers, and security guards came forward, revealing what they had witnessed. They spoke of the cries at night, of those who had tried to escape, but were caught and punished. Ruth compiled signed statements, medical records, and official documents proving the girls had been forced into marriage while still underage. With the help of Mr. Brown, she connected with top journalists. Soon, the media broke the story. "Wealthy businessman accused of exploiting young girls," the headlines read. The nation reacted with outrage. Protests erupted, with activists, students, and women's organizations demanding justice. But Boniface was not a man to surrender easily. One evening, as Ruth was leaving her office, she noticed a black SUV following her. Her pulse quickened. Before she could react, two masked men seized her and forced her into the vehicle. "You should have stayed out of this," one of them muttered. They took her to an abandoned warehouse and tied her to a chair. Moments later, Boniface entered, his expression cold. "You think you can bring me down?" he scoffed. "I built everything your family ever had. You're nothing compared to me." But Ruth refused to show fear. "The truth is out," she said firmly. "You can silence me, but you can't stop justice." Boniface smirked. "We'll see about that." He gestured to his men. "Make sure she never interferes again." Just as they stepped toward her, a sudden bang echoed through the warehouse. The doors burst open and armed officers stormed in. Mr. Brown had tracked her location and alerted the authorities just in time. "Boniface, you are under arrest," the lead officer declared. A struggle ensued, but Boniface was no match for the law. He was taken away in handcuffs, shouting threats as he disappeared into the night. Ruth, shaken but unharmed, was freed. The trial became one of the most significant in the country's history. Survivors came forward to share their painful experiences. Ruth stood as their representative, presenting undeniable evidence. "Your Honor," she said with conviction, "this case is not just about one man's crimes. It's about the lives that were taken, the futures that were stolen. Today, we seek justice for those who were silenced." The verdict was delivered. Boniface was found guilty on multiple charges and sentenced to life in prison. As the courtroom erupted in relief, Ruth looked at the rescued girls, now free, and knew she had fulfilled her mission. She had once been a girl who said no. Now, she was the woman who ensured no one else had to fight alone. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel.